I'd like to welcome you to Wednesday's podcast of our study in the book of Philippians. We are going verse by verse through this wonderful book of the Bible. And today we're starting with the third chapter, verse number 1. I want you to notice the very first word, finally. Paul says finally, and then he writes 2 more chapters. When a preacher says finally, that really doesn't mean anything. It just means that he's thinking about stopping at some point or time. Finally, my brethren, and notice what he says, rejoice in the Lord. Now that's a powerful, powerful statement. Many times we look for joy. We look for joy in all kinds of situations and in all kinds of circumstances. But notice what the Apostle Paul says. He says, let your joy come from being in the Lord. Now again, this word joy, the Greek word chara, it doesn't mean hilarity. It doesn't mean happiness. I many times look at it and I think it means this deep down inside contentment. Joy, real joy. Let me tell you something. As a believer, you can find that deep down contentment right in the middle of a trial, right in the middle of hard times, right in the middle of persecution. Now, let me remind you that the Apostle Paul is in prison in Rome because of his faith. He is writing to the Philippian church that has been heavily persecuted because of their faith. And then he writes this statement, and if we don't really understand it, we think, what in the world, Paul, are you talking about? Having happiness in the midst of trials? Having happiness in the midst of persecution? Come on, Paul. No. You see, Paul realizes that the joy of the Lord comes from our relationship with him. He says, rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice because you're in the Lord. Rejoice because of your relationship with the Lord. How many of you know when you call Jesus Lord, that means he's the boss? He's the boss of good times and bad times. He's the boss of trials. He's the boss of difficulties. He's the one that brings about whatever we need in our lives. So rejoice in the Lord. Maybe you're going through a hard time today. Take Paul's advice. Rejoice in the Lord. Turn your eyes to Jesus. Get them off your troubles. And turn your eyes to Jesus and rejoice in the Lord. Then the Apostle Paul goes on in verse number 1. And he says, to write to you the same things again is no trouble to me. And it is a safeguard for you. What's the Apostle Paul saying? Paul is saying, I've written this to you before. This is one of the evidences that we have that Paul has written several letters to the church at Philippi. And one of the things that the Apostle Paul was writing over and over again, and he says it's a safeguard for you. What does the Apostle Paul mean by a safeguard? Apostle Paul says it's no trouble. It's not bothersome for me. But he says this thing that I'm going to write to you again, it's a safeguard. Now the word safeguard, it means something that cannot be moved. It means like an anchor. It's something that's going to hold you in your faith. Paul's warnings were meant to hold the faith of the Philippians fast and secure. He didn't write to them this warning that we're going to look at in just a minute to scare them or to motivate them by fear. No, he wrote this warning so that they would not be moved away from their faith, so that they would find an anchor in their faith. And now what does he say? What is the warning that he's bringing? Verse number 2, beware of dogs, beware of evil workers, and beware of the false circumcision. Now I want you to notice here, there's 3 different classifications of the things that the Apostle Paul is telling the Philippians to beware of. Beware of dogs. You know, Jesus called people dogs. Now, so don't get offended with the Apostle Paul's language. In Matthew 7, verse 6, Jesus said these words, "Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw out your pearls before swine, or they will trample them under feet and turn and tear you to pieces." Now, we need to understand that dogs in the days of the Apostle Paul were not our nice little chihuahuas or German shepherds, or they were not domesticated. Dogs in the days of the Apostle Paul were wild animals. And these wild animals were constantly looking on what they could feed on. They were constantly scavenging. Now, if you ever go to Africa, you'll and take a safari, you'll see hyenas. And you'll see wild dogs. And what are they doing? They are roaming around, always looking for something to eat. Always looking for something to attack. Always looking for something to devour. And so the Apostle Paul says, these people, beware of them. Watch out for them. Watch out for what they're doing, because they are like these dogs, always looking to devour you. Let me just say something to you. There are people around you right now, and I'm not saying this to scare you. This is a fact, that they would love to devour your faith. They would love to destroy you by seeding into your life false doctrine. Things that are meant to separate you from your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. We as believers need to be constantly aware of these people. The next thing that he says is beware of evil workers. And I just looked at the clock and I am out of time. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Will you join us? I hope that you will. Thank you for watching.